Assalamu alaikum. My name is Janan, and this is another episode of iTVusa Spotlight, where we interview Muslim leaders, Muslim advocates, and learn more about what they're doing and what leadership means to them. I'm honored to present today's guest, who will tell us more about an event coming up and a special day, World Refugee Day, that's coming up on June 20th, inshallah. So I'm honored to present our guest. Her name is Dr. Nour Akhras. She's a Syrian-American pediatric infectious diseases physician and pediatric hospitalist who's traveled across the world to provide healthcare to children in disaster regions. Her first medical mission changed her life and has colored every subsequent experience she's had. She's a mother of four children, four young children, and she strongly believes in speaking out against injustice and the dehumanization of people. Welcome and assalamu alaikum, Dr. Nour.
Alaikum salam. How are you, Janan?
Alhamdulillah. I'm so glad to chat with you today. And is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience before we begin chatting?
I just wrote a book about my experience on these medical missions and my experience with refugees across the world. And I hope you'll pick it up. It's called Just One.
I have a copy here. So yes, we'll talk about this too. So let's first start talking about what is World Refugee Day and why is it so important to talk and know about refugees? Why is this important to you?
So World Refugee Day is June 20th. It's celebrated every year, and it's a way to put the spotlight on refugees and their plight and how they have experienced a lot of hardship, and a way for us to recognize their courage and build empathy for them and compassion, and recognize the right for every human being to live in security and safety. And so every year the United Nations holds a recognition, and there's festivities in multiple cities across the world. So in my city, Chicago, there's going to be an event downtown on June 20th, but that, because it happens to fall in the middle of the week, it's only going to be like a 1 hour thing. And then on Saturday, the following Saturday on the 24th, there'll be a all-day festival in Foster Beach. So look out for events in your own cities. Refugees have had very difficult experiences, a lot of them. I actually just heard a report on BBC yesterday by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees saying that in the past decade, the number of refugees has doubled. And the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down asylum applications and the ability for refugees to seek asylum, but that hasn't stopped people from leaving. And I also just read a statistic that every 20 minutes, a person leaves their home and becomes a refugee. And 1% of the world's population are actually refugees or displaced people.
Wow, that's really impactful, and it is really important to know about these individuals that have sacrificed so much. And one of the points that you've made in your book that you talk about is that anyone can become a refugee. It could happen to any of us, and it is really important to understand what has happened with the refugees that exist and the special day, inshallah. So tell us about what shifted your maybe passion, or what are the events in your life or things that you've encountered when you've worked with refugees yourself?
So one of the most shocking points is just what you just said, that any of us can become a refugee. So if you talk to any of the refugees, whether they're from Syria, recently from Ukraine, or even from Sudan, they will all tell you that we never thought that something like this would happen to us. And so it's really important to think about that and think about how blessed we are wherever we live, because even if you talk to like the Syrian president or my uncle who's lived in Syria his whole life, they never expected the Syrian crisis to erupt back in 2011. And now today, Syria is the source of the largest number of refugees in the world. There's more than 6 million Syrian refugees scattered throughout the world. There's 6 million Syrian displaced people internally displaced in Syria, and that's half of the population of Syria. And even if we think about what happened in Ukraine, even though when we here in the United States were hearing the saber rattling, we were hearing that Russia is going to invade Ukraine, So I think for us, it wasn't shocking when Russia actually invaded Ukraine. But if you talk to the Ukrainians that were on the ground, they were all so shocked. And then the same thing in Sudan. What's happening in Sudan right now, that's a source of refugees also. More than 250,000 Sudanese refugees have left the country in the last few months. If you talk to anybody who is living in Sudan on the ground, they will say, we never expected something like this to happen. So recognizing that for our own selves, that, you know, one day you could be a refugee, and we shouldn't think like, oh, all that conflict is over there and that something like that will never happen to us, because that's what they thought too. They thought something like this will never happen to us. So that's kind of one of the major things that shook me when I went on my first medical mission. When I met woman after woman saying something like, I was a regular middle class homemaker, or I was working and I was taking care of my children. And I kept thinking to myself, well, that's me. I'm a regular mom working, taking care of my children. And I just kept imagining, like, what would happen to me if something like that erupted and I ended up in a refugee camp with my two little children at the time. I only had two on my first mission. And being a mom was freshly in my head because my children were so young. They were 2 and 1 when I left on my first mission. And just imagining, like, taking care of your hygiene, being newly postpartum, because there were some women that were delivering babies. They were 38 weeks pregnant, 37 weeks pregnant when they became refugees and had to come and move into a refugee camp and then get sent to the hospital, deliver a baby, and come back after a few days. And then thinking about, like, how are these women taking care of themselves and trying to get enough adequate nutrition and hydration to produce breast milk to nurse these babies. And not to mention, they usually had other kids, or a lot of times their husbands were injured. Until taking care of a household in a refugee camp, like, that just boggled my mind. And it was just so difficult to imagine that could easily happen to any of us. And what would we want somebody to do if that did happen to us?
Your book, Just One, A Journey of Perseverance and Conviction, does highlight a lot of the places that you went and the descriptions that you were just giving about meeting individuals, meeting women, meeting children that are literally living life in these refugee camps. Without giving too much away, what can you share about where all you've been and any other particular stories that you remember from the camps?
So I went on a few missions. The first one was to the Syrian-Turkish border when the first set of refugees came to Turkey. That was in September 2011. There was 8,000 refugees at that time, and like I just said, there's now 6 million scattered throughout the world.
Yes.
And my second mission happened after we all witnessed the human tragedy of people walking across Europe, people getting into rubber dinghies trying to cross the sea to safety and security. So many of them drowned. Just the other day, another boat of migrants or refugees drowned. I think 78 people drowned at trying to seek safety and security. And so that was my second mission, was to Greece. I went to Thessaloniki, Greece, after I'm sure the world remembers, if you're old enough to remember, in 2016 when little Aylan al-Kurdi, a 3-year-old little boy who was on one of these rubber dinghies, his body washed up on a Turkish shore. And right the day right before that, and his image was all over the news, so like you couldn't miss it. He was wearing a pair of little blue shorts, and the day before that, I had posted a picture of my 2-year-old. That was my third child, my 2-year-old running after a squirrel wearing the same blue shorts, and I just couldn't get Aylan's picture out of my head. And so then I went to Greece. And then on my third medical mission, I went to Yemen, training internally displaced Yemeni people after the war had erupted in Yemen. And I think, if I had to say which one was like the worst in terms of the stories that I heard, it was in Greece, and hearing stories of people like getting into these boats or these rubber dinghies that, sometimes they had just, they had maybe been not working well, and they put a piece of rubber tape on the wherever it was torn, and they were using life jackets that didn't work. Sometimes the smugglers would drug them to get them all onto a boat to put more people on the boat to make more money and just to take advantage of a bad situation. So those stories like really are horrific, and like they don't leave me. I'm able to, obviously continue with my life, but there are things that trigger these memories, like if I go swimming or, um, just sometimes if I see like a life jacket. So those stories were really difficult to hear.
And you've experienced this through when you went on medical missions. And so, alhamdulillah, that's a experience that you have. For those of us that maybe are not going to be able to go on a medical mission, you advocate for us to get to know refugees, get to know people as well. What are some practical steps that you recommend that we can do to support those who have been displaced and, maybe in our areas that we don't know about?
Yeah, so a lot of American cities have refugee agencies. Like in Chicago, we have a lot of them, and I'm sure in other major cities there are. So you could volunteer with a refugee agency. Lots of refugee agencies are looking for people to volunteer in after school activities to help kids kind of acclimate. Kids, as a pediatrician and as a mom, I know that kids, one of the most important things for kids is to feel safety and security. And in order to do that, they need a routine. And so school provides that, after school programs provide that, and just being like a safe listening space for a child. Sometimes they're not going to tell you all of the horrific things that they experience, but just knowing that there's an adult there in their life who is safe, who is there to listen to them, who's there to support them, who can really go a long way. Other things that we can do is just you can adopt one refugee family. So I did a talk in Michigan with a mosque, and they were asking me like, "Oh, how can you get a refugee family to kind of open
Yeah.
up to you?" And I said, they're not going to open up to you on their first meeting, but if you keep seeing the same family over and over again, you're not hopping families. You just take one family, you take them under your wing, and then you see them once a week, once every couple of weeks. Then you will become their safe space. And so imagine yourself going to another country where you don't speak the language. What would be important to you? So one of the things that you can do is help them navigate their junk mail. I know it sounds so frivolous, but that's something
No.
that they don't know. Like, what is this? What you just tell them, no, you just throw that away. That's junk. You don't need that. Or
Yeah.
like helping them getting their driver's license, or figuring out how to work the transit system, preschool, daycare, English classes. There's so many things that you can help a refugee family navigate in this country where they don't know the language. So those are, a few tangible things. But another thing that you can do that can be maybe more impactful is to write your Congress people, right, our representatives and senators about, opening up the borders for more refugees. I know it's a big issue. It's a hot topic here in the United States with all of these migrants or refugees coming up from Central America, South America, and Chicago too. Even though we're a sanctuary city, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about why are our tax dollars going to support these people as opposed to like putting it back into the city and to people who need it. Yes, there are undoubtedly people in the city who need the tax dollars, who need to be supported, but we can also still extend, no matter how little we have, we can still extend a hand. And I feel like I experienced that from visiting refugees. Like, they would always invite me into their little tent. They would give me tea. And these are people who have lost everything. They could still be hospitable. So I think in our situation, no matter how little we have, we can still be hospitable too.
Absolutely. Yes. Those are great practical steps, some ideas. I love the concept of sorting through mail, helping people navigate, what programs their children can do. There's so many, it's the summer now too. There's so many different library events or places that are inexpensive or free that you can help support by transporting them if they don't have everything figured out for how to get places. So there's so much we can do to be kind and to lend a helping hand to people that are, new here. And then on a global, more bigger scale, there's things that we can do to advocate. So if you don't mind, you mentioned a few things, some of the core messages that are in the book that you wrote related to how anyone can become a refugee, the concept and the plight of a refugee. What are some other main messages that what you wrote this book for a reason? So what are you trying to share, and what is really important to you that people know?
Um, I think that we need to look at every person as capable of doing great things. So I know that if you talk to people who are anti-refugee or anti-migrant, they will say things like, well, we don't know what these people are capable of. And I'm like, yeah, we don't. We don't know what these people are capable of in a good way if we provide them with safety, security, education, especially the children. Like, I'm a
Yes.
pediatrician, so I always look at children and their potential and their resilience and their ability to do great things. And then on the flip side, I also think that a lot of us will say, well, I'm just one person. Like, what am I going to do? I can't change the world. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you can change one person's world. And maybe that's all it's going to take is that, a child or, even an adult, all they need is that one person to support them, to help them, to guide them, to be that compassionate ear for them to tell them their problems. And all they need is that one person to push them forward. So I think we should not underestimate our ability to change somebody's life or our ability to change something, something great. And so sometimes it takes just one person. And so I think that's one of the messages is that looking at refugees and their potential, each one as a human being and as an individual, and looking at our own potential to do something really great. And so I think it's really important to not underestimate us, ourselves, or other people.
Inshallah. Yes, that's perfect. That's beautiful. Another thing that I know is that for every book that you're selling, you're supporting Med Global. So do you mind telling the audience more about Med Global and why you chose this organization?
Yeah, so Med Global is an international medical NGO that was formed in 2017. Actually, the maiden mission of Med Global was our trip to Yemen. And I was on the board of Med Global at that time. I subsequently has taken a step back because of the pandemic and my 4 children being at home. I just needed a break. So, but they support refugees, internally displaced people, and victims of war or natural disasters on the ground. And one of the things that I really love about them is that they are always thinking about sustainability. It's not like medical missions, you're just in and out 1 week and then you never see these people again. It's more about training healthcare workers on the ground and creating sustainable infrastructure. Med Global is on the ground in Syria and Turkey, and they have been there for a long time. And so when the earthquake hit in February, that 7.8 magnitude earthquake that hit southern Turkey and northwest Syria, Med Global was already on the ground and mobilized. And if you were listening to the news, you know that the area of northwest Syria wasn't getting a lot of aid because it's not really governed by the Syrian government, and everything has to go through Turkey. And because Turkey itself was suffering from the earthquake, it was getting relief into that area of northwest Syria was kind of slow. But because Med Global is already on the ground, they were able to mobilize a lot faster than other organizations. And so I've chosen Med Global as the organization that I want to support through this book because I believe in their mission, and I really like that they are aimed at sustainability.
Yes, mashallah. That's great. It's a really great cause. It's a really important thing. And, you've been doing an amazing job trying to speak to organizations, speak to communities about these important issues. And, do you see that people are changing? Is that something that do you feel that, you've been able to impact people? Are you happy that you wrote your book? Do you see some changes?
I am thankful that I wrote the book, and I'm thankful to you, Janan, for publishing the book. And I do think that when I talk to communities, I do think that I see like the light bulb going on in people's heads or their wheels spinning, in terms of like, oh, like that, she's one person, she's a mom, she has 4 kids, and she's done X, Y, and Z, and so I can do something too, So and I'm really thankful that I have these conversations with people, and I do think hopefully it's impactful.
Absolutely. It is just that one thing. You said it could be as simple as volunteering, meeting a family, meeting a child, helping have conversations, help in English, trying to support the youth as they're learning and being a friend. And these are some simple but really, really meaningful things to also doing grander things that we can do. But it starts with just that inspiration, inshallah. And it's just really been great for me to know you personally through your journey, and I'm excited to see what all else you do with your book and just with the talks that you have and how you can impact others. In this transformation you've had as, leading this mission, personal mission of yours, what has been the most impactful thing that you've experienced? Like, what was even just through the writing process, how has that changed you as an individual?
I think I just didn't realize how um, gratifying being on a medical mission would be. I've been a doctor for almost 20 years. This summer it will be 20 years. But in fact, being on a medical mission in a refugee camp has been the most gratifying experience of my life. And I've been on other spiritual experiences, like I've been to Hajj and um, I've been to like sacred learning study programs, whether in Syria before the war or just other places. And I've been a student of Islamic knowledge for years, and I can just say hands down, going on a medical mission like this has been the most spiritually uplifting experience of my lifetime. And so writing the book was difficult, as you know, because reliving those experiences was really hard sometimes. Just, it's been 10 years or 12 years since my first mission. And sometimes when you or anybody else asks me, I still get emotional, as you can see here. Um, but just being in that space has been so spiritually uplifting. And I just feel like that was kind of a shocking part of the whole thing. Like, I knew it would be hard to go and listen to people's stories. I didn't know it would be so hard to come back home. And that's another topic that we can save for another day. But I just think that I just didn't realize how spiritually gratifying, emotionally gratifying these experiences would be.
Do you have plans for future medical missions going on them?
I mean, I have plans, but my family has other plans for me. So
Okay.
I've always had plans for future missions, but as my kids have gotten older now, my eldest is 14 and my youngest, and then there's a 12-year-old and then 9 and 4, 5. I mean, my oldest two children are really against me traveling. I think because now they have, they're more aware of what's going on in the world, the dangers, and so I will keep working on them. But it's hard to argue with your children if they're telling you want us to be safe, but then you go and do some crazy medical mission in an unsafe area. So in this next year, I hope I'm continuing to advocate through the book and through like these talking experiences that I'm having. And I'm going to keep working on my children because I really want to, my next trip, I really want to go to Gaza. And so I'm trying to convince my family why that would be a good idea.
Wow. If you don't mind, I'm going to actually ask you about how it's been, in fact, since you brought this up, just balancing, being a mother. That is something that you've mentioned on this conversation as well. Being a mother, having your career, and then also having this desire to help others. How do you, if someone hears and says, how does she do it all? How do you think that, you've been able to manage doing all that you've done?
Well, first and foremost, I always pray istikhara. I am a really strong proponent of praying istikhara and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for wisdom and guidance in everything. So I've never gone on anywhere on anything without praying istikhara multiple times.
Yes.
And then second of all, I have to have a supportive family. There's no way I could do this without having a supportive family, which includes my husband, my parents, my sister, my in-laws. All of them have helped me care for my children while I'm gone. I also have au pairs that live with me who also help with the childcare, and they've been from all over the world, and they've contributed to my children's cultural enlightenment. And so, I haven't done a lot. Like, if you read the book, I've only gone on 3 missions, which is, I mean, maybe it's a lot, maybe it's not a lot, but I think that just having the support of all of those individuals, obviously I couldn't have done it without them. Like, it's nobody lives in a silo, and I think to imagine that people just do things on their own is just a delusion, because we don't.
Right.
No, you can't. So having a supportive family, always asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, I think those are the 2 big things that have allowed me to do what I've done. I also don't like waste a lot of time, I guess you could say. I don't watch TV. I don't,
Right.
I'm always trying to be productive, and I think that's a byproduct of having good teachers who have instilled in me that one day I'm going to be asked about every single second in my life. What did you do in these minutes, in these seconds? I gave you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to tell me, I gave you life, I gave you safety, security, knowledge, health. What did you do with it? And so I think about that a lot, and so that helps me make these decisions also.
MashaAllah. And your children are growing up to learn this as well, because they're seeing the way you live, the way you lead. And yes, inshallah, I hope there's a time where everything is balanced and your children can allow you to go to Gaza, inshallah. And, it's just a pleasure to hear the way you see the world, the way you inspire just one thing, just one person, just one effort that we can all make to make the world, inshallah, a better place and to help others around. So I'm going to encourage everyone who is watching to check out this book. It's called Just One, A Journey of Perseverance and Conviction. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Search for it. Find Dr. Akhras. She's going to be she's already a huge success, but I know she's going to be a household name in all of our Muslim community and other communities, inshallah, I'm sure very soon, if not already. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we go?
No, I just hope people again, don't underestimate yourself. You can do a lot. Just put your heart and your mind in the right place.
I mean, inshallah, inshallah. Well, thank you again, Jazakallah khair. And for everyone watching, thank you. Inshallah, we'll have another live episode next Thursday at noon. Thank you very much. And assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Janan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.